great pleasure that I welcome you all today to this important panel on women's rights in Yemen in celebration of International Women's Day and coinciding with Women's History Month, just 2 weeks ahead of Mother's Day. I'm very honored to be here with you as chair of this panel in my capacity as CEO of Adalah Yemen and to share this momentous occasion with all of you. My name is Shady Qubaty. For those of you who have not attended any Adalah organized functions previously, Adalah is Yemen's leading non-aligned legal non-governmental organization established in 2015 with regional headquarters in London, Washington, DC, and Aden. We served as the Secretariat to the UK Parliament on Yemen, and we are dedicated to promoting human rights and democracy. Our team does that through focusing on three main pillars, namely research, policy, and advocacy. And today's event falls under the latter category. Just so that everyone knows, we are recording this session because we were notified that a few people could not make it in time. So that's just out there as a disclosure. If you could just please join us in watching this video that will give you some context on the situation in Yemen and also tell you a bit more about what we do as an organization. I will now just play the video.
Yemen after 5 months of war looks like Syria after 5 years. This is how the head of the Red Cross described the impact of the ravaging war ongoing in Yemen. Since 2011, Yemen, already the poorest country in the Middle East, has experienced a loss of life, famine, and internal displacement. In addition to the complete collapse of state and judicial institutions, Yemen is facing the largest humanitarian crisis in the world as 17 million people, almost 2/3 of the population, are critically food insecure and require urgent humanitarian assistance. Plunged into a war without a clear path to peace, Yemen's civilians bear the brunt of the conflict, and turning a blind eye from the crux of the problem is not the solution. Adalah, which translates to justice in Arabic, is Yemen's first non-aligned, non-governmental legal organization. Based in London, but operating in Washington and Sana'a, Adalah's mandate is to address the complex legal issues arising from the recent conflict in Yemen, in addition to filling the void in underreporting and analysis of international law issues. At Adalah, we believe that upholding the rule of law and promoting human rights are the only true means of ensuring peace and stability. In Yemen, we work to counter the challenges presented by conflict, using our international legal expertise and local knowledge. Adalah offers a unique combination of legal prowess, field analysis, and academic research, which it combines with its political knowledge and strategic thinking to understand the practical challenges facing the ever-changing and risky dynamics of this conflict. With our extensive links to leading experts in international law and our strong ties and networks with different international and local organizations in Yemen, we are able to impact policy. Adalah Yemen, together towards upholding the rule of law and promoting human rights in Yemen.
As we gather here today, we celebrate the pivotal role that women have played in Yemeni history, from the legendary Queen of Sheba, who reigned over the land more than 3,000 years ago, the indefinable Queen Arwa, who was the first queen regnant in the Muslim world 1,000 years ago, the countless women who have fought for equality and justice throughout the ages. The women of Yemen have left an indelible mark on the world. More recently, we are proud to have the Arab world's first and only female Nobel laureate. But our celebration today is not just about the past, it's also about the future and the progress that we can make together as Yemen enters into the 9th continuous year of civil war. Despite the many challenges that women face in Yemen today, we believe that by working together, we can collectively create a brighter future for all women in such a beautiful country. We are blessed that this panel has a brilliant lineup, bringing together experts, activists, and policymakers to discuss the challenges and opportunities facing women in Yemen today. We hope that it will inspire new ideas and new strategies to promote women's rights and gender equality. So I encourage all of you to engage in a fruitful and constructive dialogue. Let us listen to each other, learn from each other, ask constructive questions, and work together to explore avenues of creating a more just and equal world. Without further ado, I'd like to pass the mic to my dear colleague and Adalah's Chief Legal Officer, the moderator for today's panel, Lamya Al-Saqqaf. Lamya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shadi, for the introduction. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lamya. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. To build on Shadi's remarks, this year's International Women's Day 2023 campaign theme is to embrace equity. And the aim of this theme is to address why equal opportunities are simply not enough. However, in Yemen, women are not given equal opportunities to men. With this in mind, tonight's discussion will consider the systematic barriers that hinder women's rights and the ways in which the current war has disproportionately and uniquely affected Yemeni women. I'm excited and honored to be moderating tonight's panel full of distinguished experts, and I'm happy to introduce Rana Noman, who is a business strategy and development consultant, founder and chairperson of the Yemeni Organization on Women's Policies, which is an international foundation under establishment, specialized in women's affairs and sustainable development. Rana has also participated in a number of high-level dialogues, attended human rights workshops, and earned internationally recognized training diplomas in international arbitration, strategic management, and human resources. We also have Baraa Shiban, who is a Yemeni researcher and analyst. He works as a Middle East and North Africa caseworker with the London-based human rights group Reprieve, and is also a member of the National Dialogue Council of 2013 to 2014, the multi-party council tasked to negotiate the framework of Yemen's new constitution. Baraa has also written on the local dynamics of the Yemen conflict and has advised the Yemeni embassy in London between 2018 and 2020. The structure for this evening's discussion is as follows. For the first 20 minutes, our distinguished speakers will each have around 10 minutes to present their general take on women's rights in Yemen, followed by a moderated discussion for 30 minutes. And this is where I would encourage all audience members to think of questions throughout the discussion and to either use the raise hand function to pose a question or to write something on the chat function, which will be closely monitored by the Adalah team. And so without further delay, let's kick things off. Rana, you have the floor.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Shadi. Thank you, Lamya, for having me here to be like one of the panels here. And I don't know what to say. Like, I've been working as a field researcher for the past 15 years. I started my field as a media researcher and then social researcher. And yeah, I've been focusing on women human rights defenders, their roles and protection for women human rights in the Middle East. I worked on several researchers with other Yemeni local researchers as well. I tried to consult Yemeni government, especially Ministry of Human Rights. I'm also yeah, I didn't really, I can't say that I've achieved anything. It just, writing papers, trying to write recommendations, trying to participate. And yeah, we're trying to see where the file of human rights in Yemen is going to be. And of course, We can't only blame the Yemeni government, but also we have to address our worries and concerns with the international community, especially since the war started in 2015 and until now. We just noticed that there is political delegations, humanitarian aid, but we are aspiring for more because Yemen is a member of UN Security Council. And this is not new, but still we don't really notice any accountability or any equity, or we don't know who's going to commit to the pledges of the reconstruction of Yemen. So yeah, here, let's discuss and see what we can do, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Rana, and I appreciate your remarks in terms of the lack of accountability with the violations in Yemen. Baraa, what is your opinion on the current situation that women face in Yemen?
Well, I think it's unfortunate that we usually the image of women taking part in Yemeni life has been recorded by cameras or by the international humanitarian organizations as women standing in queues, which is very unfortunate, demanding humanitarian aid. But I think that that image, that portrayal of Yemeni women, which has been accumulating for over the last 8 to 9 years, doesn't give really Yemeni women a lot of justice in terms of their struggle, in terms of their work, regarding their political participation in the Yemeni public life. And I can go all the way back to when I started working with the Yemeni civil society. Yemeni civil society has been very active in Yemen since 2004. I mean, they have been active before, but since 2004, they started to address quite the challenges facing Yemen as a country. It's a time when people started to hear about state corruption, bad governance, lack of freedom of speech, and many other issues. But what the most important, I think, is that women have been leading these discussions since 2004. Women have been leading protests, calling for changes. One of the very known leading writers and journalists in Yemen, and that's all the period before 2011 and before the uprising, have been women. Most of the protests that have been calling for political reform, for changes within the country, actual changes, have been led by women. So I think it wasn't a surprise that when the uprising happened, when 2011 happened, what is known internationally as the Arab Spring, Yemeni women were at the forefront. They were leading protests. They actually, I remember very well when we were in the streets, they led the first workshops to address what we called the national document for the Yemeni revolution, basically the demands of the Yemeni youth, and I think the peak of women's role in Yemeni life came into fruition in 2013, when finally the national dialogue took place, and the Yemeni women took 30% of the seats. It wasn't surprising because they have been demanding for their participation in the political life for quite a long time. They have called for changes within the electoral system to ensure 30% of Yemen's future parliament to be composed of women. But I think in my experience, I was a member of the National Dialogue. What came to my attention was not only just the quantity, the quota, the percentage, but also the quality of women who participated in the National Dialogue. One of the leading constitutional lawyers I remember during the National Dialogue was a woman. and the women who also took part in the process after the national dialogue in drafting Yemen's constitution was women. So I think, and the unfortunate events of the conflict kind of gaslighted the potential that Yemeni women had, but we have to remember that those women still exist. The same women who were there in the national dialogue, who were leading the protests in the uprising in 2011, and who actually led the public discussion in Yemen since 2004 with the Yemeni civil society, are still there and are still waiting for the right time to actually to re-engage with the public life. Of course, it is very challenging when militancy and militants take control. We have seen how activists have been picked up. Many women have been detained, jailed. Women have been harassed. There was constant defamation campaigns across the country by many parties, but it's specifically challenging at the Houthi-controlled areas. The Houthis have led a systematic campaign targeting women, trying to block them from participating in the public life. And we've seen for the first time that we see Yemeni women activists being detained, jailed, and tortured in prisons. Quite a very shameful mark, I think, that will haunt, especially the Houthis, for quite a long time. My hope, which is I'm trying to close my remarks with a positive note, is that a lot of people are, especially the Yemeni younger generation, are accepting women's role to actually acquire more space now. No one is seeing that a political solution could be settled without seeing Yemeni women taking an active role in the political resolution. So I think with all of the challenges that are facing us, there is still a lot of room for hope. And I think it is also important to address that actually we need to also focus on quality, not just the quantity, because we constantly hear about we want quota, we want how many, what is the percentage of women. But actually, when I worked and engaged with those women in the national dialogue, there is really strong potential. There is a lot of Yemeni women expertise that Yemen, unfortunately, because of for many reasons, haven't taken the advantage of. So.
Thank you so much, Baraa. That was very, very insightful. And if I will get back to the quota point that you'd raised, but Rana, I was just curious in terms of traditional gender roles and the cultural attitudes towards women in Yemen. In your opinion, have they been challenged or reinforced during the war?
It depends on the mentality, because we are a diverse society. So I cannot really judge, and this needs studies to be accurate about the data that is provided. Mm-hmm. But what I can believe in is the will and the dedication of women and determination as well, regardless of the political will or the legal matters, which both are very important. But I do still believe in the younger generation. I do believe in women and girls, that they are not only half of the society, but even more population. And I hope there will be a political will to support women, to provide protection on at all levels. And I hope that there will also be tension from the international community, because they are our partners in this. And I always say, wherever I go, if Yemen will remain on the praying, like the whole world is not going to be safe, and we have to learn from our mistakes and look where we are today. The war in Ukraine and Russia, and I hope there will always be like wise dialogues.
Yes, that's very true. And considering that you are also a member of the, you are the founder and chairperson of the Yemeni Organization on Women's Policies, an international foundation, what in your, how effective are these, initiatives such as that and programs such as that to address the specific needs and challenges faced by women in Yemen during the war?
In fact, I worked with Yemeni women, and I am also a member of Women Solidarity Network. Yemeni Organization on Women's Policies is also a signing member of the Dutch National Action Plan on UN Resolution 19. I forgot, like 15, the 1325. Sorry. Yeah. Which is based on women, peace and security, and of course women all over the world trying to have a seat at the table. But for me, women are always there and they have power. They just need to support each other. I hope that what is written on paper will be also practiced in reality. And I hope the day will come to really support each other and believe that we all can do something, especially to encourage amendment in the Yemeni law. That's I hope like one day this will happen. Politically, I'm not a politician and I don't want to be a politician. I hope that I can do something for my country. I hope that Yemen will be like one of the top countries instead of being ranked on the YOWP index, being like the worst in humanitarian in the humanitarian situation, in the violence. So I hope that we can work together to really encourage Yemen policy to be on the top of the list.
That's great. That's yes, I hope so too. And building on the seat at the table point, Baraa, you touched on the 30% quota. And you said how it doesn't matter in terms of the quantity, it's the quality that matters. But I would disagree, because the quantity itself has not even been, upheld. The minimum of 30% has not been upheld. So considering that you were a member of the dialogue itself, what do you think, in your opinion, is the reason behind not upholding the 30% minimum quota for women, and how can that change?
Well, I mean, basically, I think there is lack of political will to uphold the quota. It doesn't mean that it can't be done, but I think it needs a lot of work and dedication from the people who are working on especially on political participation. It needs active also work from the civil society. And what I would say is, when I mentioned the quality, is that a lot of people thought that if you just add if you put a percentage, that you won't have quality. But in my experience, the participants that I was very lucky to engage with in the national dialogue, have unique expertise. They were one of the leading experts in the fields that they occupy. And I remember all of the women who used to work with us in the national dialogue. So I think there is a lack of political will. I think it's not a secret just to see the current cabinet by the Yemeni government. There isn't a single woman, which is unfortunate. That's quite a step back, a step definitely in the wrong direction. But I think it needs, again, the same way how the civil society organized and campaigned and worked on advocacy. I think that we need to work again and ensure that there is political will and that they're under constant pressure to comply with their commitments.
Yes, I would agree. And building on that, actually, in order to promote equity, with taking into consideration the theme of this year's International Women's Day, Rana, what effective strategies can be implemented, in your opinion, to bridge the gap in the opportunities provided to Yemeni men versus Yemeni women?
I do believe that the state has to adopt a strategic policy to enforce a special budget for women and girls. I do believe that we have to focus on education, like primary and higher education. And as we can notice, unfortunately, now the education in Yemen is deteriorating. The curriculum has changed. So I have no idea what can be done at this moment. And even though we've mentioned before, and also women specialized in the agenda of women in Yemen have written recommendations, several recommendations since 2015 to the UN Security Council in regards to education. This is number one. And of course, equity, like I hope that also there will be new implementation for encouraging international trade that also would contribute to the economy of Yemen. Supporting as entrepreneurs as well, opening a new market. And I hope that the embargo on Yemen would be lifted soon, because this is not supporting. In fact, through research, we noticed that smuggling through borders continue. And I don't understand how there is embargo in Yemen, like air, ground, on the other side there is smuggling, and we don't know how does this work. So these are recommendations and ideas that I can
That's great.
give you.
But do you have anything to extend on that question in terms of, you know, what effective strategies can be implemented to apart from having a political will, which does not exist currently because of the aforementioned reasons, but what, in terms of on a local level and as well as on an international level, what can be done to bridge the gap to of the equal opportunities between men and women in Yemen?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think we need to realize that there is a shrinking space for women. The women's space, their role that they generally expect to have in public life is constantly shrinking. And I would repeat what I said. It's shrinking in almost everywhere, in all parts, by all parties. But it's specifically more shrinking, definitely under the Houthis. They constantly preach against the role of women. They believe that that there is some foreign conspiracy trying to trying to affect the role of women. There is the leaders of the Houthis speak about that in Friday sermons, and unfortunately, we've witnessed activists, women activists, being jailed, being imprisoned, being in normal circumstances. I'm not sure that they would even be taken to court. And I mentioned the case of Intisar al-Hamadi, for example, an actress and a model who unfortunately was arrested by the Houthis because their expectation of what women should do is different from what the Yemeni women generally were experiencing and what they expect. And I think the role of the international community here is important. They cannot engage normally with actors who constantly violate women's rights in such an appalling and very apparent way, and try to conduct business with them as normal. Like, at least they need to mention it, they need to comment on it, and people need to be reminded that this could not be going on. And they try to make an example of her so that other women won't won't move, and walk in her footsteps. And I think a lot of women, for quite the obvious reason, then get scared of, how can I expect to be politically active or engage or attend meetings and workshops when I see other women being picked up and detained and in this case even tortured?
To build on that specific point, actually, we've seen a lot of coverage, especially from the West, in terms of the women revolution in Iran. And would you say that Yemen has had less coverage in terms of how the Houthis have, approached women's rights in the Houthi regions of Yemen? So what is your opinion on that? And how can we raise more awareness in regards to, the violations that women are experiencing under the Houthi regime?
I think definitely yes. Yemen has received less attention, much less attention than what what's happening with the women in Iran is appalling, and it's very horrifying. But it's the good side of it is that more and more people are talking, and that did enable and empower a lot of women to actually come out even stronger and try to speak, because they hear the echo of their voices when they speak. With their slogan has been it's been repeated all over the world, and unlike what's happening with the Yemeni women. And I think also one of the main problems is the Yemeni conflict has only been framed under one specific title, which is, this is just a humanitarian crisis. And once you mention that, you mean you definitely, it then reflects. So the Yemeni people then don't really need a government that is representing them. They don't actually talk about issues like democracy, like good governance, like women participation, like women's role, because only what they need is international humanitarian aid. And I think this is a misrepresentation of the core of the problem. Yemenis do actually call for a democracy. They have been demanding more participation. They want a government that is representing them, that represents, and I think once if you don't have an open, if the public space is shrinking, then definitely women would be one of the primary victims. And I think people need to be reminded that this is a country that had its role in it. It had its time in an active political participation. Women have been active in the Yemeni public life since 2004. This is not a new thing, and we need, especially us as the civil society, need to keep reminding everyone around us. And it's a long struggle, but I think it's a struggle worth taking.
That's an excellent point in terms of how Yemen's war has been portrayed in and the effects that it's had on that. Just checking on the chat, we have a question from Kate Nevins. Kate is saying that she's hearing really impressive things about women leading on prisoner exchanges, road opening negotiations, and other local conflicts negotiations. Could either of you tell us a bit more about some of the roles women or women's groups are playing at a local level? Rana, would you like to take this question?
Yeah, women have been negotiating local dialogues and dealing with all parties, and they've participated even in exchanging prisoners. They were responsible during when the war was really intensive to bring the children to their families who were recruited by the Houthis or either parties. And women have really played a major role during the war since 2015 until now. And they, without women, there will never be a healthy, strong society, because women didn't only manage to negotiate any conflict, and they succeeded in solving big conflicts. They are still fighting corruption. They are fighting to have their decisions made or accepted, to have a voice on as a member of states as well. But unfortunately, until now, we only have around 9 women consultants within the current government, and I hope that this number will increase, because we have qualified women and they can play major role in bringing Yemen, not only bringing Yemen, but they really can lead a government. And I'm not undermining the role of men, but again, we need the support of international community, because Yemen doesn't live alone.
That's great. Thank you so much, Rana. We also have a few more questions. Baraa, you could take this if that's okay. Asma Ibrahim is asking about the North and South divide. Historically, women have had greater freedom in the South, and attitudes have been less conservative. She references here particularly Yemen pre-unification. Why do you think we have taken so many steps back since then?
Well, I think there are many reasons. Obviously, if I talk about the recent history, of course, it's the conflict. Usually, in political, in a hostile political environment like it is in right now, if civil society raise the issue of women, they will immediately be told, we can discuss this later. This could be discussed after the conflict. Also, I think in general, we wouldn't say that yes, there was some level of political participation. We had elections, but I wouldn't classify Yemen was a democracy. And under authoritarian regimes, usually women would be the victim, unless they unless they echo what the state wants them to say. And that's why I think I mentioned when I started speaking about the Yemeni civil society since they got active in 2004, because that's when we started to see women participation being more apparent. People starting to see women journalists, writers occupying the public space. And I think also the wrong expectation about how the public would perceive women's role, because there was the general feeling that actually the public would have a negative backlash, that there would be a backlash. They would have a negative interpretation about what women can do. But actually, when we were in the national dialogue, I felt it was quite the opposite. I think the public were ready, and the more they see women in the public space, the more they're going to be accepting.
Yes, thank you very much. We also have another question on in terms of political will, if you don't mind taking that as well. Is there a lack of political will? Is a lack of political will the main barriers to equity and equality, or does it also extend to sociocultural preconceptions? Also, are there any domestic legal tools in Yemen that can be utilized for change? And that was from Bana Itani.
I think our hope is the more we move towards having a really sustainable political resolution, the more we have chances to have an active role for women politicians. And political will is a very important thing. Yes, there are many social barriers. It's Yemen traditionally is very conservative. People don't expect women to have, but I think there is a very wrong interpretation of what the Yemeni public would accept and not accept. A lot of people did assume that the national dialogue that the public would have a backlash regarding having a bigger, relatively bigger representation than before because it was almost 30%. But actually what I experienced was the opposite. The public is ready, and I think was ready and will be ready the moment there is a political will. We saw women. I went with colleagues from the national dialogue to the most remote areas in Yemen to address first of all, the articles of the national dialogue, but also having the engagement, the discussion regarding what do they want to see in the national dialogue. And I wouldn't say that they had any negative reaction just because who was speaking to them was a woman. So I think sometimes there is prejudgments and sometimes wrong interpretation about what the public is accepting and what it is not accepting.
I think that's a great point you put across, Baraa, especially with your experience in the National Dialogue Conference and going out and meeting some of the local communities. Just building on that point, I'd like to ask you, Rana, since you play such a vital role with connecting with many women groups on the ground. I know in Ma'rib and elsewhere, a huge issue that Yemen is currently facing is underage marriage, which is one of the many injustices suffered silently by women in our country. Last week in the UK, actually, we celebrated the changing of the law to prohibit all forms of marriage under the age of 18. They passed this law called the Marriage and Civil Partnership Act, which basically means that now anyone who's under the age of 18 will no longer be allowed to marry, even enter into a civil partnership, even if they have parental consent. So of course, there's still a long way to go before Yemen hits that point. But I just want to ask you from a social perspective, when you speak with many of the women you interact with on the ground, can you provide us with a bit more light on some of those experiences and what you think should be done urgently to mitigate such a huge injustice?
I do believe that raising awareness about child marriage is very important. Trying to invest in the economy of Yemen. Again, I'll focus definitely on education and if you ask me again, I will tell you like about marriage. There are some young girls who know nothing about marriage, and they want to get married for different reasons, whether they come from divorced parents, whether they just want to, they think this is like the best way. I also believe that reactivating the family law in Yemeni constitution and go back to the old Yemeni law article that was operating or applying in the south of Yemen before the unification, to focus also on the women's right and the family law, basically. So we have to work on several levels. I cannot tell you, oh, social is different from political, from economy. We have to work so hard, and there is so potential in Yemen. And yeah, but challenges are a lot as well. And I hope that we can succeed in achieving something in the very near future.
Thank you so much, Rana. And to build on that point, child marriage is a huge issue that Yemen is facing. And my mother, who practiced as a lawyer in Yemen, she was actually one of the lawyers who played a role in fighting child marriage. And I remember one thing that she continuously mentioned with the girls that she defended is the lack of will to attend school. And that's a reflection on our, on our government, because education is not compulsory. And in that sense, Baraa, what can be done to, push, these are basic issues that are, are completely ignored, I think, especially from on the international level. Education is not compulsory. There lacks a legal definition of what discrimination is towards women. We have all these, parties involved in the, in the Yemeni conflict, but in terms of the peace process, not only should women be a part of, deciding how the peace process should look like, but also, these issues need to be tackled, because without, without peace, without these issues being tackled, then ultimately there won't be peace in Yemen. So what do you think is the, the drive to push towards, those issues?
Well, I think it's a very difficult question, because with all of the challenges, it's like, how can you unpack so many different things? But one of the issues of what Rana mentioned is the economy. In my experience, might not be the case with all of the fathers, but with some of the fathers that I've spoken to, is that sometimes it's not so that they don't want to. Sometimes they are forced to make a choice, because it is costly to take your children to school, and if they have to choose, then they will make the choice of taking their sons, because they're expecting this is the person who's going to then later on provide to the family. And also another thing is the expectation of gender roles. Many of the young girls expect to be married, so they think, well, at least when she gets married, she'll be taken care of. And I think it's just a matter of again, a lot of work needs to be done, but there needs to be proper investment in the economy that would incentivize actually the families to take their young girls to school. and actually to feel that this is not an economic burden on them, that they can actually benefit more at the future when their daughters actually become, you know, teachers, lawyers, doctors, you name it. Yeah.
That is very true. And in relation to that, we also have a question from an audience member. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. May read Ryan. What exactly is the UN doing in and for Yemen, and especially for Yemeni women? As it's, Rana, would you like to take this question?
It's a very difficult question. On the other side, I don't want to say, wow, the UN is doing a lot. They are delegating meetings, receiving reports. Unfortunately, what is expected from the UN is not meeting the like, let's say, like the minimum requirements of women need. If we, and for example, we have Intisar Al-Hamadi, who has been imprisoned for a few years, which is very sad. And I always ask, like, a 22 young girl spent a few years already in prison, how would she be feeling after she leaves, if she manages to leave? And maybe you were expecting a lot from us as panelists, but I hope for who's ever listening to us to really investigate what's happening in Yemen at all levels. And really, I ask journalists to try to have access to Yemen, and we can support this. I'm willing to support this. Really, if you really want, I am willing to support this. Go and see what's happening in Yemen and expose. And I've been asking since 2015 for international independent investigation. So I hope that my call for you there would be received.
Definitely received on our end.
Can I jump in here, Lamya?
Yes, I was just going to ask if you have anything else to add on that point.
Yeah, I think thank Rana for being diplomatic, but I can respond to the question of, unfortunately, the UN has done nothing. And I mean this literally, because the UN usually likes to speak about women. They like to tick a lot of boxes until it becomes a little bit sensitive, and then they walk away. And unfortunately, they do not address many of the issues. And for example, the case of Intisar Al-Hamadi is a very clear case. If the Houthi authorities are trying to make an example of literally a model and an actress who have done nothing, she's not political, she hasn't done anything, they're trying to frighten every other woman from actually engaging. And the UN making a choice not to comment, not to engage with them, not to actually even use whatever leverage they have to say, actually, the least they could have done, they would say, we cannot engage.
I think we've just lost him. Well, just to build on what Baraa was saying, I would agree with that, because I believe that Yemen has ratified a convention. I think it's the Convention of in relation to women's rights, and there's been a lack of accountability for not building up to for not living up to the standards of the of the convention itself. If I think we have, let me just check if we have any more questions from the audience.
I think Lamya, meantime, Baraa rejoins. I have a question that I had in mind for Rana. So the organization that you've started over the past 7 years, I want to hear more from you about your personal experience about setting up the organization. What trends have you been seeing over the past 7 years ever since you started this great initiative vis-a-vis women's rights in Yemen?
Sorry, yeah, could you rephrase the question, please?
So what I'm asking about is, so the organization that you've started, the Yemeni Organization on Women's Policy, you started this initiative more than 7 years ago. So I'm just wondering if you compare where we are today to where we were when you started this organization. Are there any trends that you've seen on a social, economic, political lens?
Based on my personal experience,
Yes,
on
yeah.
my work and what I've done with a small team, and we are working on our own capacity, like in terms of the development in Yemen, it's all, as I mentioned before, political. Even the what UN and member states have promised to provide Yemen, even since the Yemeni dialogue, I don't see any progress really that is tangible. Based on my experience, for example, sometimes when I go to meetings and I connect with diplomats after the meeting, I don't hear from them. Maybe I need to have another connection, and I don't understand why even or why did they even give me their contacts. Yemen relies still on minimum humanitarian relief. And that's what we have been calling for years. Yemen not only deserve more, but we want to work on sustainable development. And maybe there are financial or economic funds that are divided between group of parties that we don't have access for. And we would like to have access to these budgets so we can do something for our country. From my side, really, I didn't see any progress. I just see meetings like the one that we're having now, several studies, repeated studies, and it seems that no one learned from the past. And going back, for example, if we want to work on the economy of any country, I do believe, and based on previous studies and from global studies, any country that wants to invest or to develop, I think they have to focus on the agriculture sector.
Yeah, I mean, I got cut off while I was saying about the role of the UN, which I think the least to be said is very, very disappointing. It's literally meaningless if they host meetings for women, hold conferences for women, but then when the Yemeni women actually on the ground face challenges, they shy away and be silent. And we have many examples. Like Ansar al-Hamad is just one case. We have, and I think it's a good chance to send our salute to the Mothers of Abductees Association. This is an entire association made of the mothers of the abductees. And they have been the leading organization in regards to documenting all of the detainees in all parts of Yemen. They receive little to almost no support from the UN, which is again another disappointing and another example of when I say they have done nothing. The UN have done nothing except words and then meetings and then conferences, and then try to repeat the same thing again and again. And unfortunately, there is this misconception that actually, if we started to raise these issues, for example, with the Houthis, they wouldn't talk to us. I think they got it in the reverse. The Houthis need the international community because they are seeking legitimacy. And the international community needs to reaffirm this. If you want us to engage with you, you need to respect those. Those are basic human rights. We're not talking about something very obscene or unachievable. And but unfortunately, the method has been designed in such a way that can cater to the demands of militias instead of seeing the interests of the Yemeni public as a whole.
And to build on the point where you said the UN has done virtually nothing, would you say that there is a sense of double standards between the crisis in Ukraine and their response to Ukraine and compared to Yemen?
I mean, I think absolutely. I mean, I think anyone can see that. I mean, not to take away from what's happening in Ukraine. What's happening in Ukraine is appalling, and I think they deserve all of the attention and all of the support that they can receive. But unfortunately, there is an ongoing problem that a lot of people, especially in Western countries, think that European countries' problems are the international, it's the world's problems, but the rest of the world's problems is not Europe's problem. And I think this creates this double standard that you mentioned.
Exactly. We have another question from Asma Ibrahim. To what extent does the international community need to push this cause? I think domestically the will needs to be there first and foremost, but how best to push this forward in a positive and sustainable way? And have any countries in the Middle East and North African region have been helpful in pushing this cause? To either Rana or Baraa, who would like to jump in to take this question. But would you like to go ahead?
Well, it's International Women's Day, so I'd give it to Rana.
No, I'd give it to Baraa because I don't really have access to any funds. I have no access to I really don't know what the funds. I really work on my own capacity. I read on reports that Emirates have promised, and Saudi Arabia have promised, and also the international community have promised, but I see nothing tangible on the ground. So yes, there are promises. Yes, there are things are written, and yes, there are funds that are divided. I don't have access to anything. I really don't know. As simple as this. If you have something like really, let's work together to do something. I believe that we can do something, but when, how, no idea.
Well, I think again the one of the problems is what I mentioned earlier, is the focus of the conflict has been describing, or the narrative has been, this is a humanitarian crisis. And I think that narrative, although yes, there is a humanitarian crisis, but it is a result, it's the consequence of the main problem. And there has been little investment in development, as Rana mentioned, in the economy. And I think it is time for these things to change, and the approach needs to be different, because it is something to say that we're pledging something for this year for humanitarian response, and everyone feels good, but actually we know on the long run this is not what Yemen needs.
Yes, and in the sense of the long run, how do you think, in terms of the peace process in Yemen, would women continuously fighting to, play a part in that. Do you think it's a mentality issue of the elitists for continuously, denying women a role in that? And I am being extremely critical in that, but it is what it is. It is the unfortunate reality, because if they truly did have a will to include women, then this would not even be a discussion.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think I agree with you. I agree with that description. There is a lack of political will. There is an elitist view. There is also, I don't know, maybe fear of competition. But many things combined. But most importantly, I think because the space for the civil society has been shrinking, the expectation of women participating in the public life has also been decreasing. And I think until the civil society start to claim back the public space again like they used to, we're gonna struggle regarding this issue for quite a long time.
Yes, and I have one more question to Rana, actually. Rana, what is, in your point of view, what Yemeni women in the diaspora, what could they do to push for women's rights in Yemen?
Oh, that's a really difficult question, because women try to do a lot and really worked hard to connect. It just, we don't have access to decision makers. Personally, I don't, even if I do any really, like, I have to be like open about this. Any program, any initiative that I try to work on, just before I'm going to start organizing something, for some reason everything stops, which is fine. We all work in groups or as individuals to do something, but yeah, maybe it's for the elitists to do this, or maybe they think that we're not qualified, or competition, or just repeating the same old stories and then complain.
That is unfortunately true. Thank you both for such a fruitful discussion, and I hope it will open the doors for women to occupy the positions that they deserve. And yes, I really appreciate both your time and effort in this discussion. And if you have any concluding remarks, please feel free to point them out.
I see there is a question here.
Oh, yes. Can you say some more about what Yemen needs in your opinion?
And I think that forms a very good segue to the concluding remarks. Yeah. What, in your opinion, do you think Yemen really needs vis-a-vis women's rights? We could start with you, Baraa.
I think I will touch on what was just been mentioned. I think a lot of the Yemenis in the diaspora has something to offer, but they unfortunately we haven't been very active. And I think from here I would call on Adalah to actually, we can start engaging with the Yemeni diaspora to call their MPs to raise, for example, we can call for specifically, for example, the case of Ansar al-Hamadi. We need to hear the echo, her voices, as we were talking about what's happening in Iran and how the women in Iran have yes, they've been struggling, but at least the echo of their sounds have been heard across the globe. And I think if we took this, let's say we take the initiative and start engaging with the MPs that we want to raise the issue, for example, of Ansar al-Hamadi and the other women activists. Let's say, we put it like Ansar al-Hamadi could be an example, and then all of the other women who have been either detained, been abducted, been faced with any form of real threats and danger inside Yemen. At least they would feel that actually their struggle, their plight is not unheard of. People do hear, do listen, and their voices is being echoed. And I think this is something that we can take. And I would call on Adalah to actually take the lead on this. And for me personally, I'm happy to participate and help in the way in any possible way I can.
Thank you, Baraa. Rana?
Oh, it's a very difficult question. What Yemen needs a lot. And again, to focus on really sustainable development. And as the UK is having the last say on the Yemeni file in the UN Security Council, I'd like Adalah as well to take the initiative to raise the issue of the not only the current situation of Yemeni women, but the current situation of Yemen as an independent country, which is I can't tell if Yemen is lucky to be located on that strategic location, but I do believe that we can do a lot. And Baraa has suggestions. Maybe he can organize something to bring people together. That would be great. And I hope Adalah would make things work practically than politically. Thank you.
Thank you both so much for your contribution. And I really appreciate the insightful discussion. And thank you as well to the audience. And I'd like to pass on to Shady for the concluding remarks.
Thank you very much, Lamya, for doing such an incredible role with moderating this session, and happy International Women's Day to everyone who's joined us in this call. To just incorporate George's last question that I just see appeared on the messages, I think we'd all agree as Yemenis that we need to see peace as soon as possible. Now is March. This is the month in 2015 when the war has officially started in Yemen. So we're actually entering into the 9th year of war. So I think what we actually need in the near future is peace at any cost, and all parties coming to the negotiating table in order to be able to put together a lot of those questions that we've been discussing today. Without having any form of active peace, you'll have a number of parties that are all with their different views, and it would be very difficult to actually implement something substantial. It will only remain as dotted inks on the page, as opposed to something that the political parties and factions could come around. I think what we've all heard in today's session is that despite being excluded from formal negotiations, Yemeni women are still doing so much on the ground and are defying all the odds, despite them not being given the voice by the political class. They've mediated inter and intra-community disputes, including the release of detainees, opening humanitarian corridors, and also stopping the recruitment of children by armed actors. I think what I also heard through this panel is that a lot still has to be done to ensure that women are given an active stake in society. We cannot depend on a lot of those personal efforts. They have to be enabled in order to drive the change that we all want to see in our country. Thank you, Baraa, so much for challenging the status quo and for being very, very open, making it clear that quality matters just as much as quality, and raising awareness as well about the shrinking space for women. in society, and efforts to counteract that are definitely vital. Rana, you've been heard that having a political will is imperative to provide protection for women at all levels. I think one of the statements you made that resonates with me is that without women, there will never be a healthy society. And I think that should be a driving mantra for how we should rebuild our institution after reaching some form of peace. As Adalah Yemen, we've left the panel with quite a bit on our shoulders, especially with the concluding remarks. We promise to do our best, as we continue to do, through policy, through research, through advocacy, but real breakthroughs tend to only be achieved by the amalgamation of efforts. So we will also be reaching out to different groups, both here in the UK, and also various stakeholders, to try and take on board some of the comments that you've mentioned, to try and make sure that even while we're trying to reach to a state of peace in the negotiating table, we can ensure that women have a platform on there and an active voice in any dialogue. With that said, I'd like to really thank our distinguished speakers, Baraa and Rana, for engaging so openly with this topic with such an open heart, and for answering questions and for being very, very flexible with us, despite some of the technical audio and visual challenges that we faced. It goes without saying that Adalah Yemen's thanks is extended to all of you for being such a wonderful audience, for asking really poignant questions. And just joining us today in a very intimate conversation, and something that would be very important for the future of Yemen. We would urge you to follow our social media pages to hear more about some of the events that we will be organizing over the coming weeks and months. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Adalah Yemen. And I will just give you, Lamya, as the moderator, the final word before we close the session. I think we're bang on time on the hour and a half mark.
Well, to reiterate everything that Shady has established, I think Yemeni women, without them, there will not be peace in Yemen. And I would incredibly emphasize, the importance of their role to play in Yemen's peace process, and to also be part of the vision of the peace process and tackling the many issues that they face, especially gender-based violence and child marriage, are to name a few. And although we've had quite a grim discussion in terms of everything that's wrong with women's rights in Yemen, there are plenty to celebrate in terms of women's role in, in mediation, especially in rural areas during the conflict. And with that, I once again thank both our speakers for their contributions, and as well as Shady and Asma, who have played a vital role in in the planning of this event, and as well to our audience members who have contributed in terms of asking very engaging questions. And yes, so that's all I have to say, and I thank you all once again.